Hello and welcome. This is Clelia Peters. I'm so delighted to be here with you today, and so delighted to be joined by Stephen Rosenberg and Phil Miller from Greystone. Stephen, I'm going to hand it over to you first to give us a quick introduction to Greystone, and then to talk about Phil and why you brought him onto your team.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Clelia. It's great to be here chatting with you and bringing Phil into the conversation. As I said beforehand, any of the hard questions, any of the hard topics are going right to Phil, right? And
I'll bear that in mind.
Okay, that's great. Again, as I've said previously, Greystone is a really special place. Yes, we're in the real estate market. We're mostly multifamily, healthcare, finance. But what's interesting about the firm is our mission. And our mission, which started 30 years ago, is really to enhance other people's lives. So yes, we're a for-profit company. We work really hard. We drive. We're competitive. We're creative. But the point of all of it is to generate profits that we can give away. And I started the company 30 years ago, and with no capital. We've never raised any equity at the firm. We've given away pretty much at least half of our profits. And I myself am not an extrovert. I'm probably the definition of an introvert. But given all of that, somehow we've managed to grow. We now, as a lender, we've got a $60 billion loan portfolio. We do about 15 billion of lending a year. We own and manage through a not-for-profit that we set up about 10,000 multifamily units, and we give 100% of that profit goes to charity. We're planning to do the same thing on the healthcare side. We already own about 5,000 skilled nursing beds, and we're just we're excited about every day because we love what we do, but also because we know the impact on the lives that we're able to make. And I'm really super excited to talk about technology because technology is going to even take us to a different place.
Yeah, so I'm so grateful. Actually, I hadn't really known the philosophical underpinning of what you're doing at Greystone, and it's really inspiring and exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let's, Phil is here with us on the call. Do you want to introduce Phil and explain what motivated you to bring him on, and then maybe Phil can talk about his particular background?
Absolutely. Yeah. Phil has been, is, and will be just an absolute blessing to Greystone, because there's no doubt about the fact that that technology is going to transform the commercial real estate industry. And I can speak to it from the lending perspective. There's so much about real estate that every time a loan opportunity comes in, we've got to start searching for information and finding it. That's even before we start analyzing it. I think technology and the data that's out there now is going to allow us to bring all of that information together just by punching in the address of the property that we're really trying to analyze. And not only will technology allow us to kind of bring the data that's out there to the workstation, technology is going to allow us to also analyze that data and to more precisely weigh underwriting criteria that historically we've used, but maybe all of those measures are analyzed equally, but we know that certain measures are more important than others. And I think using artificial intelligence and machine learning will allow us to be more precise in our underwriting. And that's even before we get to workflows, which technology can really be helpful on. And so I'm just thrilled that Phil, with his Wall Street background, his computer science background, is just going to help transform Greystone into just a more efficient, more profitable company that is going to operate in a larger orbit than we currently are. And so I'm thrilled to have Phil at the firm, and it's really I feel very lucky that we were able to snag him.
Yeah. Phil, do you just want to give us a quick kind of
Yeah.
overview of what brought you to this place? And then we'll jump into discussing some of what Stephen has been referencing. I think all of the innovations that are possible in the commercial lending space.
Yeah, of course. I am a computer scientist by education. I came to the States in 1994 and joined Merrill Lynch with, PhD in computer science, developing structuring software for fixed income. And that coincided with the emergence of the CMBS market.
Yeah.
We had a structuring model for those transactions for CMOs, for ABS, that was rolled out onto the trading floor. And I found myself sitting on the CMBS desk structuring deals. And I managed to unusually pivot from being a technologist into joining the debt origination team, which at that time was in the investment banking group. And I had a 14-year run at Merrill, and it ended with the financial crisis. And what's interesting is that in the financial crisis, right in the middle of it, I joined Morgan Stanley as a desk strategist, which in the context of CMBS and commercial real estate is really a PropTech role. But it wasn't called that then. And from 2008 to 2014, I was the head desk strategist at Morgan Stanley for CMBS and commercial real estate lending. And what a desk strategist was essentially a new culture, a new vertical within the firm, mirrored on Goldman's model of having people like myself with hybrid backgrounds bring technology and trading floors and investment banking groups and lending groups together, because I think historically there's always been a significant gap in communication and kind of fusion of those two cultures.
Yeah.
And, I knew how to program, I knew how to build models, I knew how to build systems, but I also knew the business. I was an originator at Merrill. I originated over $6 billion of loans. And led complex transactions and really thoroughly understood the capital markets. So it was a great time. I was like a kid in a candy store. And people said to me, you know what, you should leave, you should set up a firm, you should do this thing. But the VC money wasn't really there.
Yeah.
And in 2014, a couple of us left to go to Macquarie to form a CMBS group. Which we did, and we sort of ran into difficulties with risk retention, which came in 17. And so then we moved the platform to MUFG, the Japanese behemoth, and we tried to get that up and running with a unique structure with my friends from Principal Financial. Very difficult to be a new entrant in the CMBS market. And we called time on it towards the end of 2019, which is when I started talking to Steve and Kurt Pollock at Greystone, in what I thought was a conversation about CMBS, but it very quickly turned into, when they understood my background, I could see their interest was more in my PropTech, skills. So that's how I got here.
It's such an interesting background, and I think it's going to bring so much value to Greystone because, I think one of the things we've struggled with a little bit in PropTech is just because you know or understand technology doesn't mean you understand the business. And I think you're really in a unique position as someone who has deep experience at both sides. So let's talk in a little bit more detail. Stephen, you started to talk a little bit about some of that, key highlights of where you think technology is going to transform commercial lending. But maybe, we can talk through, you mentioned first data. Maybe we can start there, just talking about, the process or the ways that you think technology is going to change data gathering as it exists kind of in the initial phases of loan analysis today.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, from my perspective, I remember when I first started in the industry, where it was just that residential mortgage-backed securities were just beginning. And I remember asking the question about whether or not something like this could actually ever happen with commercial real estate. And I remember them saying to me, Rosenberg, you're such a dope. commercial real estate, every property is so different, and residential is homogeneous and commercial is just the opposite. So go back to school because you obviously didn't learn anything. And maybe I should have gone back to school, but I didn't listen. And but what I see is that we should be at a place where, and what I see in the future, in the very near future, is that once you punch in a property address, you should have all of the data, right? All of the data that applies to that address, comparable properties, comparable rents, comparable expenses, utility bills, comparable, just everything should be at your fingertips because everything's available now.
Yeah.
And so really it's a matter of the information is out there, but it should be just available to you in about a second, right? And the analysis of what you do with that material should also be done automatically, and that should take another couple of seconds.
Yeah.
And so I really think that underwriting, which is taking weeks now, and it takes months to close a transaction, I don't see why that should take any more than a day or two. And I definitely see that coming in our direction. And those who achieve that level of efficiency and that ability to gather data, digest the data, and turn those results around as options to clients, they're going to win. And those that don't are probably going to be left behind. So I see in the commercial real estate, I see happening exactly what happened on the residential side. And I think it's a no-brainer. And so that's what I see.
Yeah. So Phil, I'm curious, as the technologist, how do you think more practically this happens? Is this something that you guys develop in-house? Is it tools that exist in the marketplace already? Is some of this proprietary data? Is it all public data? Talk to me about the practicalities of creating this system.
Sure. Certainly, I think I'm sure the audience knows that the background theme of this is PropTech, and the VC money flooding into the sector has fueled a lot of innovation. So there's new companies providing new types of data and data migrating from different sources, fintech and the consumer disruption and the residential techniques that have been learned. So I think the net sort of effect of all of this is that existing data vendors are upping their game and new data is flooding in too, and is being used in innovative ways that hasn't really been used before. For example, building FICOs, where multifamily assets, you can't disclose for confidentiality reasons, obviously, individual tenants' credit scores, but you can obtain FICO scores on a sort of index basis for an address. And that's something new. I mean, if you talk to a seasoned multifamily underwriter, he doesn't necessarily know that kind of information is available. And what's interesting is that whilst this sounds very aspirational, it's already starting to happen. I think when you look at commercial real estate asset classes, arguably multifamily is the first one to be attempted in terms of automated valuation. And there are many schools of thought on what automated valuation should be used for, but it's not really aspirational. There are companies like GeoPhy and Skyline and others, I'm sure, that have already begun and are practically generating revenue and forming appraisal companies in JVs to disrupt and revolutionize not just the appraisal industry, but also the equity side of multifamily real estate. GeoPhy with Walker and Dunlop has formed a new appraisal company. Enriched Data has developed a platform with data for the acceleration of existing appraisers. So this is already happening, is my point. And then on the equity side, companies like Skyline are co-investing with, well-known, funds and institutional investors, and creating a lot of buzz about how they can accelerate equity investments. So lots is changing, and inevitably it matters, acutely for lenders too. And I think different lenders are in different stages of but firstly recognizing, and then secondly, embracing these changes. It's already happening, and it's going to change. If appraisals can be done in 5 days or less, even quicker, I guess, if you pay more, then from a 3-4 week sort of time frame, then that's something that you not only have to keep up with, I think you need to embrace and ultimately develop your own. You can license some of these services, but that's a dependency that I think that's complementary data to your analysis as opposed to being a dependence. And I think it's fundamental for any company that's swimming in data, not just in real estate, but across the board, to develop data science expertise and the development of these credit workstations, accelerated underwriting is similar
Phil,
to the property industry.
Yeah, Phil, clearly, do you mind if I just ask Phil a question on something he
Stephen,
said?
please go ahead.
Yeah, so Phil, when you talked about an appraisal getting done in, instead of a few weeks, less than 5 days, why shouldn't an appraisal get done in exactly 10 seconds?
Well, because
what data is not out there that allows you to just do it, write the narrative up automatically, and get it done, other than maybe the site inspection, but which you can do by with a drone.
Right. As the system is put together right now, as we all know, there's a requirement for an MAI appraiser to stamp and author the appraisal, and that's a requirement of the buyers of the loans. But that is it's a good question. I mean, it's the same question that you would ask a trader or ultimately a lender. At this juncture, would you commit capital on the basis of automation? And that's going to become more and more of a kind of challenging and philosophical issue. I think today the answer is no. I don't think equity guys, teaming up with AVM companies will commit capital blindly, automatically. But from where they were to using AVM assisted analysis or AVM assisted appraisals is a massive acceleration in and of itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what part of what you're highlighting right now is the delta between what's technically possible and what is, almost plausible or realistic in terms of the norms of the market today. I think that we may be at a moment where what's technically possible is more advanced than what's plausible given market norms. But that does, Steve, highlight for me a question of sort of what's your aspiration? Is this a transformation that you think is going to happen, within the next 12 to 24 months? Is this a 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 year transformation? How different do you think things are going to be at Greystone 2 years from now versus today?
Yeah, my hope and aspiration is that we will be pushed relentlessly by Phil and others on the IT team, as well as others at Greystone, to just absolutely push the envelope. From my perspective, I don't see any reason why this can't happen in the next 12 to 24 months. I just don't see any reason why it can't. And in terms of equity or other investors accepting this sort of 10-second appraisal as opposed to the 5-day or the 2-week appraisal, I think the way that's going to happen is we just have to run both side by side. So a property comes in, we should be running the 10-second appraisal, put that on the side, and now run the 5-week appraisal and see if there's really any difference, and why there are differences. And I think that after you run that side by side a couple of dozen times, and you realize, well, actually the one we did in 10 seconds might be as good or better than the one that took, a couple of weeks, then already the market starts changing. And I think because people know that data is out there and people trust artificial intelligence, I mean, everyone gets on jets, and most of the jet flying, most of the pilots' work is essentially automatic. We have self-driving cars. We're in a society now where people trust, they want to test, but they trust technology. They know that it's coming. And I think people are hungry not to be left behind. So if it doesn't happen in 12 to 24 months at Greystone, I'd say shame on me.
I also think it's interesting to point out that it's not just about acceleration and efficiency and maybe being ahead of your competitors, but the industry as a whole accelerating and closing timeframes, compressing. What's also interesting is as you flood more data in from different sources, ultimately what you're going to get is more intelligent and nuanced valuations. And to simplify that down, because obviously, machine learning and tons of data, for a lot of people, that's potentially overwhelming, particularly the way that the real estate industry has traditionally and still currently kind of thinks. And what I mean by this is valuation. We have this quantized cap rate scale for assets. It's a 4 cap, it's a 4.25 cap, it's a 5 cap, and the debate sort of works around 1/4 of a point in cap rate. And ultimately where this is going to lead is more nuanced cash flows, because you'll have better intelligence about revenues and expenses and where you need to adjust them for market. But also you're going to have much more nuanced valuations where two assets that used to trade at a 4.25 cap or a 5 cap are slightly different. So we can have a continuous cap rate scale. That's what AVM's data intelligence will bring and that's very meaningful, I think, because it really changes the landscape a little bit. It's finer resolution on valuation.
Yeah. Clearly, can I mention an area that is just super exciting? I know where technology meets actually sort of the mission of many of us to enhance the lives of the residents that are at our multifamily properties. Do you mind if I just
please
take a crack at that? Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. What's super exciting to me is what our data is telling us is that we have an opportunity, owners and borrowers and lenders to multifamily property owners have an opportunity to have a huge impact on the residents' lives. And what the pandemic has taught me, because we've had situations, we have properties that are low income by nature, and schools are closed, and now we're creating programs where we're going to the schools, getting the kids homework that are part of the community at the multifamily community, and bringing the schoolwork to them, right, where they don't have computers, or getting them computers. And what we're finding is that people are falling in love with being a community, not just being a renter in an apartment, but being part of a community where people care for each other, where services are provided centrally, and whether or not it's barbecues socially distanced, or whether or not it's getting homework for the kids, or whatever it is. But the data is telling us that we can bring technology to the apartment communities in such a way so that people feel a part of a community. It's interesting that people's health care, now the data is telling us, the data that we're receiving is telling us that people's health is related to how much a part of a community they feel, or whether or not they feel lonely at the apartment community. And so I'm so excited about using technology, not to just tell us what loans to make, but it's using technology to tell us how to make those communities, responsible for each other, and essentially communities that care for, provide health care, provide food, clothing, all sorts of things. But I think that the multifamily area can literally change the life of a family. And there's so
I
many
agree.
single parent households out there. And I think being part of a community changes everything.
Yeah. I think, I think it's a parallel discussion, but I strongly agree.
Yeah.
And I also think that there is a whole world of technology right now and technology providers who are really interested in how technology can help to bring communities, multifamily communities together. And I think that, that's going to become more and more significant in terms of the perceived value of being in a multifamily environment. So let's just go back to a discussion about innovation in commercial lending. And one thing I did want to touch on is innovation in particular in the workflow processes and in underwriting, where I think we're going to see meaningful change as well. Phil, can you take us through how you're thinking about those aspects of commercial lending innovation?
Yeah, sure. As far as underwriting is concerned, I think it goes back to the earlier discussion, about automated valuations. To even contemplate using data science to, produce automatic valuations, you've got to gather all the data. And when you look at the workflow of, an underwriter within a lending organization, they're gathering data and they do it repetitively. They go to different websites to CoStar, to Reese, to Moody's, to different brokers. They make calls into the market. They gather information and pull it all together. So in many ways, what you need to do to accelerate the underwriter's role is very similar, and the path to also generating automated valuations. So I think that's about getting data, subscribing to, choosing carefully the right vendor suite of a mix of providers. No one's got the silver bullet, the perfect data. It's about putting the jigsaw puzzle together most cost effectively for an organization, and then building from there. But as Steve sort of laid out, I see no conceptual, technical obstacles or really financial in the context of, is it affordable and does it make economic sense to build a state-of-the-art workstation for anyone who across the whole of commercial real estate, frankly, not just multifamily. Multifamily is obviously the easiest in a lot of different respects for automated valuation, and it's no coincidence that that's where those models have emerged. So we're going to do that, and I've been at Greystone since May, but I've been immersed in lots of conversations with vendors, as well as lots of conversations internally with the stakeholders and the people who perform these functions internally at Greystone. It's not about disrupting them. It's about helping them and accelerating them. And I guess ultimately, in the context of what it means for Greystone, more volume with the same people because we're more efficient. Workflows is an interesting topic. I'd never really, even as a computer scientist and a systems architect, and as I've spent more time being a business guy than a technologist, honestly. But workflows really piqued my interest back in 2012 when I was at Morgan Stanley, where just randomly I happened upon, in the oil and gas group, they had a system for trading oil futures and other resource derivatives that was based on Alfresco, which is one of the activity-based Java BPM, business process management / enterprise content management systems. And that was my first introduction to it. And once you sort of see business process management for what it is and how it can really assist both in terms of rationalizing an organization, but also standardizing the dynamics of an organization and giving you monitoring and a view onto how, this organism lives and breathes. It's hard to go back. And that happened to me actually at Morgan Stanley. And then I left and I spent 6 years doing CMBS again. And now at Greystone, I'm sort of the workflow evangelist. I think I'm trying to not be over enthusiastic about it, but to bring, there are lots of different systems at Greystone, different groups using different systems. And that's fine. And they're very embedded and they're, they're working, they're functional, and clearly Greystone is successful. But what I think brings all of that together is business process monitoring, and doing that ultimately, the purpose of doing that ultimately, not just to make things more efficient, is to make, one way to look at it, and I think it's probably the most important thing, is that the customer experience, which is ultimately one of the most important things for Greystone's clients, brokers and borrowers, will be heavily influenced and dependent upon that architecture, because they are, going to come to Greystone for servicing. They're going to come to Greystone for FHA loans. They're going to come to Greystone for Fannie and Freddie loans and commercial loans. And all of that broadly, if you want a consistent customer experience that works, is best in class, which is one of our objectives, I think the workflow, both in terms of efficiency, but also consistency in delivering that experience, is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah, Phil, just a quick question for you. How would you define success? So if Clelia is asking a question, I guess, about workflow, if we're successful in bringing technology to workflow, what does that look like? What does success look like in that in the workflow area? What will be experienced by the client if we're successful in workflow technology? Can you give me a visual on that?
Well, certainly from a sort of web portal perspective, they're going to love that experience. And behind the scenes, it won't be, like lots of things going on behind the curtain to keep the show running. Yeah. It'll be robust and efficient and smooth and consistent for the client. Like a great experience looking at their loans and servicing, looking at loans that they've submitted for quoting, and looking for loans that are in closing across all the different products. So ultimately that, but also the acceleration of and response times, right? So servicing, if you have a question, a query, submitting that in combination with human customer service, coordinating all of that through the customer experience. For loans in closing, being able to see where they are, what's outstanding, what is due from you, the borrower, just by looking at your app. They're waiting on various documentation around the closing of a real estate loan.
Do you see loans closing in a few days, as opposed to 2 months or 3 months?
That's the aspiration, yeah. And I think for multifamily, it's got a lot more chance. Yeah. I think when you look at, say, an office building with 100 tenants, and you're waiting on estoppels, you can accelerate the appraisal process, which is a critical path that takes up, if a loan takes 8 weeks to close, an appraisal takes 4 of that. I think that estoppels and other documents and requirements that are, around the closing of a loan, those things also have to be tackled. And that's a tricky one, because a tenant in an office building doesn't have any motivation to respond more quickly. So the industry has to figure that out, a different way of doing it. But for multi, I don't really see, the hurdles. I mean, if it's mixed use with some retail and a little bit of office as well, you run into that same problem. But if it's just pure multi, I think you can really accelerate this.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to jump in because I just have one last question as we wrap up. These are ambitious and expensive plans talk to me a little bit about how you imagine capitalizing this. Is this something where you could, will seek additional capital yourselves, and where you imagine yourselves becoming a player, offering capital to other people in the market too?
Sure. That's a really good question. I think from our perspective, we're challenged on a daily basis as to how to use capital most efficiently.
Yeah.
And I will say that investing capital in processes that allow us to differentiate ourselves by what the customer experience is, that's capital well spent.
Yeah.
Right? If we think that this investment will result in that experience that will so differentiate us, then that's exactly where our capital needs to go. And my thought at this point is that is where our capital needs to go. The question is, are we supposed to, do we build it? Do we buy it? How do we best do it? And I don't have an answer to that yet. And in this process, there are lots of different pieces of technology. My sense is that we'll probably buy a whole bunch, right? We'll probably build a bunch and make sure that they're able to talk to each other. And so I think it's going to be a combination of it, but the commitment to achieve the result is clearly there. And we're supposed to use our capital to do that. And to the extent that we've got to raise additional capital in order to make that happen, then that would be a really bad mistake not to do that. Because those who achieve that result are going to win. And those who don't are just going to be left in the dust. And so that's how I think about it.
Well, that's a great answer. And I want to thank both of you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.